So there is a new sports, arts and culture minister, and he is vowing change. Zizi Kodwa, the former deputy minister in the presidency for state security, promising to intensify school sports programs and work with anyone and everyone who wants to keep children safe and occupied. He joins me now. Good evening to you, Minister, and thank you for your time.
Thanks very much.
Congratulations. You are really raring to go. You're in a very different portfolio. How are you preparing?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a very I'm overwhelmed indeed by the task ahead of me. But of course, it's not only myself. I have to work with everybody, the stakeholders across the industry in sports, in arts and culture. I have to hit the ground running with the speed of a cheetah and a leopard.
Both of them together at the same time?
Both of them together at the same time. Whichever gets injured, the other one must pass. But it's important that we don't have time. This country at the moment, if you look at the mood of the country, it's quite a depressed mood. There are special moments that define the character of a country. And I think there are moments that we need in the past that have lifted the spirit of the people of this country. We're in that phase. We need something to lift up the spirit and the mood in the country at the moment. And only through sport that we can be able to do that.
So it sounds like a big job, especially if you want to do these massive marquee things, because I'm thinking, you know, World Cup status, like World Cup 2010 status is probably what you had in mind, which was a huge psychological boost for the country. So given this big ambition that you have, did your predecessor leave enough for you in terms of a strong team and structure?
Well, I have enough team. I met with him today. I spoke to him about a few days ago. I think the foundation has been laid. But I think we have to build from what he left. Because if you look at what I spoke earlier about special moments of the country, not only the 2010, if you look at 1995, if you look at the Blue Bulls match in Soweto, those were defining moments in the country. And I think what is upcoming now, the Netball World Cup in Cape Town, is one of those defining moments. Very soon we'll be launching Netball Friday. As you can see, I'm wearing one of those T-shirts.
Halala, I like it.
We need the spirit of Philippines here. And that spirit must come back. As I indicated, that we need something to lift up the spirit of the country. But there are certain maladies in the country that we must use sport, not just as in the way it was defined in the past, as dance and song. What the sport can play in some of those maladies, such as GBV, for example, the issues around substance abuse, the issues around drugs, for example. What is the role of sport? And we're beginning to define those, obviously collaborating with a number of departments, including the community-based organizations.
And it's the community-based organizations I really want to focus on, Minister. So we did a special broadcast in Eldorado Park not so long ago, and many communities across Gauteng were represented there who are really being impacted by GBV, Absolutely. By crime, by drugs, and by poverty. And their cry was that they were being completely ignored, and that these recreational facilities, getting young people involved in activities like sport, after-school clubs and so on, there simply is nothing there. How do you begin with those communities as a sign of confidence building that change is coming and change is going to be something that you can see and experience in your community?
Imam, as a consequence of hosting state-of-the-art stadiums, the World Cup in 2010, there are a number of if you like, the legacy projects that we have. And some of them, I don't think they've played their role. And I think if you look at a number of the townships, whether in the Cape Flats, whether in south of Johannesburg, Westbury, you may find one or two recreational facilities, but they're not well maintained for young people, children, to make sure that we take them away from substance abuse, from drugs, from gangsterism and so on. Part of what we want to do now is to focus on those areas, to make sure that we give activities to young people, including the rural sport infrastructure, where we found some of the best and the quality talent we have in the country that comes from the hinterland, where there is no development at all, and yet they represented South Africa in the international stage. You can talk about Makayantini's best cricketers. You can talk about Mapimpis, come from the rural areas with no rugby infrastructure, but yet they've proven that they can be the best in the world. So our focus is going to be, among others, recreational facilities, some of whom those legacy projects are there, but they are not utilized to the maximum. And we must make sure that as we do, it must contribute to the fight against GBV, against substance abuse, against issues of gangsterism.
They've been neglected, haven't they?
They have.
So this happened under the watch of your predecessor?
Part of the problem is that we have neglected, we have allowed them, not communities, to take ownership of those facilities. They've been made there to be white elephants as if they are state or government owned. These are properties that must be owned by communities. What we can do now, we must go back Some of them need revitalization. Some of them need some refurbishment. We must make sure that there is ownership of the community in some of those recreational facilities. For example, a number of communities in south of Johannesburg, we used to have swimming pools, for example. We used to have inter-games or inter-school games. Some of those fields are no longer maintained, and therefore we must go back, working with communities and stakeholders within the sector to make sure that we bring hope, we bring some of those activities which will take young people in the main away from these maladies that I've identified in societies.
And you're onto something there in terms of including communities, because any expert who is talking about stakeholder negotiations and getting buy-in for projects says you've got to, for the people that you're trying to do something for, you've got to start by asking them how it's done. So by engaging those communities, perhaps there'll be a greater prospect for success in terms of that co-ownership.
We'll never succeed of our own. Government on its own will never succeed in doing anything. It must involve communities.
Right. So let's talk then about, and not to be mean, and I know that you're being polite and you're being collegiate about your predecessor, Nathi Mthethwa, but he was sometimes, referred to as the Minister of Thoughts and Prayers. When an artist died, there were thoughts and prayers and condolences, criticized by the arts fraternity for not doing enough impactfully to support artists and their projects. How are you going to work with this particular sector in our country? You talked about the psychological damage and the place of depression and anxiety that South Africa is in at the moment. And if you want a quick fix, go to the artists. They are the healers of society.
Whoever is in the position I am at the moment, given its location in society, you must have passion about it. You must have passion for sport, you must have passion for arts, you must have passion for culture, you must have passion for heritage. And therefore, one of the things I've already done, have been in contact with a number of stakeholders within sports, arts and culture. The whole of next week, started yesterday, is to meet the stakeholders. Not to ask what they want, almost clear what they want. We need to speed up the space in which we can help them, working with them, not to work in isolation, also coordinating the work of government departments to make sure that we make a maximum impact, to make sure that at least we make a contribution in the development of the sector across, whether it being sport, whether it being arts, being culture. And I'm sure that out of the engagements that we're going to have the whole of next week, we'll be able to find one another. I can speak less about the assessment of my predecessor, except to say we commit ourselves with the passion that I have about the sector to make sure that we improve, we build better relations with the stakeholders, and we can work together to succeed together.
Right. So I know that there would be a lot of community activists, people with great ideas, young people, entrepreneurs who know exactly the antidote to some of the maladies that you just mentioned now in our communities. How do they get involved? How do they get in touch? Because there's a lot of gatekeeping. You got to know someone else to get in. But you're not going to be that guy, are you?
You'll be amazed at the number of people that I've spoken to. Some of them from as far as villages such as Njalele, as far as villages such as Letifrey. These are rural people. My number has always been in the public space, as you know, my previous life as a spokesperson of another NGO. So it's very easy for people, and I've got lots and lots of them. And we will make sure that my work is not in the office, Iman. My work, as I spoke to the department today, I want people to take off their stilettos and heels. We must be on the ground. We must be in the villages. When I talk about rural sport infrastructure, we must be there in the rural areas to identify those talents. One of the people I always admire in sport was Jomo Sono. He used to go in those areas where there was no stadium, and he brought some of the best talents that the country could find. This is where we must focus, among others, so that our development is not urban bias. We build as much development as possible, also to include sport, rural sport infrastructure and rural sport development.
Part of the problem, Minister, of being inspirational is that when you don't follow through on the hope and the excitement that you inspire in people.
It's called disappointment.
And it's deep, and we've had it too many times. It's almost at pandemic levels as well in South Africa. I'm really interested in the detail around, and you've given some of that detail around how you're gonna make that happen. Just share a little bit more about where you're going to start and where people will begin to see the impact of your leadership.
We're not starting anything new, Iman. There's a lot that has been done, some of which we have to make sure that we accelerate. There's been one of the outcry, I hear this outcry everywhere else, the misreaction has been almost the absence of leadership to inspire and to give hope and to provide that leadership. And one of the things I think we must bring as a newly appointed leadership, myself and the Deputy Minister, is to be available and to have passion about what we are talking about. Meeting with stakeholders, follow up, and make sure that we give hope to those who are already despondent. Like I said earlier, the country is almost in a depressed mood, and we need to do practical things, not abstract things, to lift up the mood.
Well, we're going to be watching closely and critically. So, what sport do you play?
I play every sport except netball.
Okay, well, let them show you a thing or two during Netball Fridays. Thank you very much for talking to us tonight. We appreciate your time. Thanks for stopping by. Zizi Kodwa is the new Sport, Arts and Culture Minister.